So what I want you to do is, for the next few minutes that we're together, I want to challenge how you think about talent. I'm not going to give you a bunch of go-dos. How many knows what go-dos are? Most people come and they want you to tell them what to go do. Because if I gave you 3 go-dos and they don't work, you're going to give up and move on to the next. So I don't want to give you a bunch of go-dos. I want you to think about talent differently. I want to challenge you to think broadly about how you go after talent. And I want to challenge you broadly about how to think about creating a culture where you retain great people. So it won't be a lot of go-dos necessarily, but it will be, wow, I hadn't thought about that. I should probably think about that. I should probably gather my team together so that we can think differently about that. So we are, regardless of industry, we are dealing with a fundamental shift in how talent is attracted and retained today. If you have not experienced a change in how you attract talent and how you retain talent, you are a rare breed, because COVID has left us all trying to figure out what is this new normal that we're dealing with today. And these are some of the questions that if you have not sat down and started to ask yourself and your teams these questions, you're going to be left behind. And so again, challenging your thinking. Are you thinking about some of these things? One is, how has the definition of talent today shifted from years ago? What we consider to be talent, how we go about attracting talent is not the same. And we're going to talk about that in a second. Can we adequately predict the skills and experiences we will need 3 to 5 years from now? There's a lot of data that says that there are jobs that are going to be created in the future that we don't even know of today. And so how do we think about talent that we might need in the next 3 to 5 years? You guys probably deal with different levels of automation. Are you thinking about the talent that you will need to be able to manage that automation 3 to 5 years from now? Are the motivators and attraction and retention tactics the same as they were yesterday? Are they the same as they were pre-pandemic? Many of you may have to deal with a virtual culture today. How many of you have employees today that are hybrid or not necessarily coming into the workplace today? We still have people who are dealing with that. We still have employees who expect that. And that is one of those areas where employers are having to make up a clear decision and a line in the sand. Can I operate my business with hybrid employees? Because that is now not a nice to have, but in many cases when it comes to talent, it's a must have. People are making decisions based on whether or not they can have a hybrid career. Can your workforce survive another global crisis like a pandemic? That's not a rhetorical question. Can your workforce survive another crisis like a pandemic? Yes or no? You think you can? Awesome. I'd love to hear from those that are saying yes when we get to this next question, which is, have you implemented a post-pandemic lessons learned plan? How many of you have sat down with your teams, with your organization, and said, if something like this happens again, this is what we know now that we didn't know then that we can apply in the future? Anybody have a post-pandemic lesson learned plan when it comes to talent? Organizations that are prepared for the next pandemic, that are prepared for the next crisis, are organizations who have taken time to say, what did we learn from this pandemic? What did we learn from having a workforce that no longer meets in one place and that was geographically dispersed? What did we learn about our talent? What did we learn about our business? And how do we ensure that we are prepared for the next wave of change? Because there are experts that are out there that says that this is not just going to be a rare occurrence. There are going to be some changes, maybe not to the scale of a pandemic, that businesses are going to have to prepare for. And oftentimes, and I know I'm an entrepreneur, you're so excited to get back to normal that you forget what abnormal was, and we don't take those lessons learned and we don't write them down and codify them and make sure that we're prepared for the next wave of change. Are you future casting and looking at how your industry is being transformed and how that now applies to the talent that you will need for the future? If you are not future casting and thinking about what that next level of talent looks like, you may be left behind. Because as you saw with that magnet, there is a war for talent. There's a quote that I saw from PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers consultant, that I thought was really powerful, because that is what we need to focus on. And this quote is, for students, it's not just about acquiring knowledge, but about how to learn. And for the rest of us, we should remember that intellectual complacency is not our friend, and that learning is not just new things, but new ways of thinking. It's a lifelong endeavor. So we've got to be thinking differently about talent. We cannot just react to the fact that we don't have talent. We need to take a step back and think about, how might I be proactive with the shift in the workforce demographics today? Anybody remember these brands? Like, I remember, who remembers A&P? Like, I grew up in Florida. I'm a Florida girl. I remember A&P. Worked there, awesome. Blockbuster, all of these companies were on the S&P 500, but no longer exist today. Intellectual complacency, we just talked about it. We can get complacent with our market share in the business, and we don't spend enough time thinking around the corner, especially when it comes to talent. And what happens when you stop thinking? What happens when you get complacent and you're comfortable with your status wherever you are? There's a quote that says, comfort is the worst thing in the world for humankind. Because we can get comfortable and then we can get stagnant and no progress is being made, and we're not challenged to think around the corner. And so what I want you to do is think about how to attract talent. Think about what kind of culture you want to create so that you can be that magnet of talent. I won't cover this full slide, but there are some work study messages from PwC who've done a number of studies on talent today. And some of the messages around talent for managers and entrepreneurs and companies when it comes to talent. The first one is act now. This isn't about some far future workforce. What I'm talking to you about and what I'm going to share with you is about the workforce that's here and the workforce that's coming, and the things that you need to be prepared for as it pertains to your talent. Take a bigger leap. One of the things that PwC says is, if you are thinking about doing something that may cause you to be uncomfortable when it comes to talent, do it. If you're thinking about a level of automation, if you're thinking about investing in talent experts in your organization, if you're thinking about putting in applicant tracking software, if you're thinking about introducing AI in your interviewing process, basically what PwC is saying is do it. Think outside of the box, because that is going to be the differentiator for people who get talent and those who don't. Also, think about people and not jobs. Many of you may have organizations where automation is going to take over opportunities. The reality is, how do you protect your people? Not necessarily protecting the job. The job may go away because automation may take over. But if you've got good people, how do you reskill those individuals? How do you find a different place for those folks in your organization? So these are some of the things to think about, changing your thinking when it comes to talent. I won't spend a lot of time on this slide, but what I will tell you is that there are 5 megatrends that are being faced today in our workforce, all across our country and across the globe. We're going to spend time talking about 2 of those, which is the technological breakthroughs that can help you with talent, and we're going to spend some time talking about the demographic shifts and how to be prepared for those in the workplace. We won't spend time talking about rapid urbanization, which is the workforce migrating towards cities. We won't spend time talking about shifts in the global economic positioning or resource scarcity and climate change. But these, suffices to say, are the 5 things that are going to impact talent today. We're going to talk specifically about 2 of those because I think those 2 might resonate with you the most. So let's talk about technology for a minute. How do you embrace technology when it comes to talent? How many of you have an applicant tracking system? 1. Okay. 2. I just want to stop for a second. How many of you have maybe 25 to 50 employees that you hire? So less or more? Okay. So we've got a few. One of the things that I would challenge you to look at is applicant tracking systems. Another way to get your openings and your opportunities out there to the masses. And they have them for all levels in the organization. So what I'm talking about, if you're thinking, wow, she's just talking about things that only would attract a PepsiCo or a Disney. No, these are for smaller employers as well. A lot of these great systems and technology that you might assume is for a bigger organization, these companies are smart. They realize that the vast majority of businesses are small businesses. So there are small business platforms that would apply to your organization with every one of these that I'm talking about. Recruiter chat box, digital assistants, job description writing. All of these are forms of automation that can take over the human element today and help you become more efficient when it comes to attracting talent. Video interviewing analytics, onboarding tasks, all of the paperwork that you have to do for a new hire, all of that can be all of that can be automated at the press of a button and take out a lot of that administrative tasks that you might have or the people that you might have doing that, and you can have those folks working on something else that's more effective for your organization. By 2030, according to Deloitte and other studies, 75% of the workforce will be made up of employees that are less than 35 years old. What do you think that says? Anybody? Shifting values. Yes. What else? Anybody else? Yeah, that's true. That's true. Say that again. Boomers are retiring. Yes. Yes. Anybody else? Yes, in many cases, that is true. What I would say, though, is they're taking their institutional knowledge with them. And so organizations need to be prepared for that. Because if you've got retirees and boomers that are going to be exiting the workforce, and you've got now the vast majority of your workforce that's going to be new and under 35, what does that mean for you? A lot of training, a lot of transferring of knowledge. So how many of you have key leaders in your organization, key people that are doing major things that are going to be retiring in the next 3 to 5 years? Okay. What are you doing to make sure that you're getting that institutional knowledge from those individuals into the minds and the hearts and the ears of those folks that are coming? This is the kind of thing that you should be thinking about. Because I will tell you, I've been in organizations where we've allowed institutional knowledge to retire, and as soon as that person retires, we're left trying to figure out how in the world do we fill this gap, and what did Bill do again, and how did he handle that? And so Bill got so many questions and so many calls post-retirement. Why? Because we did not think about getting that institutional knowledge out of Bill's head before he retired. So thinking about what that means, what this stat means is that you're going to have a much different workforce than we've seen in the past. And that workforce is going to be working to get up to speed with that institutional knowledge. And somebody mentioned it earlier, there are going to be some value shifts that are going to happen with that workforce. And so how do you prepare for that? Workforce shifts inform our thinking. How do I want you to think about what we've just been talking about? There are 3 things that I want you to think about as it pertains to the conversations that we've been having. I want you to think about, how do I capitalize on these megatrends? How do I ensure that technology is really embedded in my organization when it comes to talent? And it may start with some basic things like, how are you using social media to brand your organization when it comes to employees? How are you using things like Glassdoor that we talked about before? How are you getting your word out on your employment brand on social media? How are you using applicant tracking? How are you using technology that allows you to potentially write resumes? How are you using technology that allows you to do video interviews? How many of you have done video interviews before? Yeah. I mean, imagine, because everybody has a screen now. And so as opposed to bringing people in for that first level of interview, you have them to do a video interview. You have your team assess them from a video perspective. And then the folks that you really want now can come in and do a physical interview. So now you're taking some time away from having to schedule interviews with folks that may or may not be right fit talent for your organization, and you're introducing some aspect of technology into the process. So thinking about, how am I introducing technology into my talent process? The second is preparing for the demographic shift. We just talked about that. We just talked about when Bob retires, you're going to have your institutional knowledge going out of the window. You're having now a workforce that's much younger, that has a different view of work, and we're going to talk about what that means. How are you going to retain those people, and how are you going to attract them? And third is being intentional about culture. Being intentional about culture, recognizing that culture is not a place.